Let us start reading the poem line by line, word by word. I shall try my best not to become too detailed, but the problem is I love Ramanujan very much. I love his poetry very much. I love this particular poem very much. And you must bear with me, you must forgive me if I become a tad too detailed. And there is also the great truth that if your knowledge is superficial, you may manage to scrape through your undergraduate examination. But if your goal is to clear the civil service examination or the NET JRF examination or the pre-doctoral examination or even to do extremely well in your postgraduate examination, it is extremely dangerous to face these examinations with cursory knowledge, because cursory knowledge carries with itself the possibility of letting you down very badly. So please bear with me if I become a tad too detailed. I know that students want everything from the examination point of view. I was a student myself once, but I believed, and I believe now, that it is always better to be a tad too detailed rather than to be a tad less detailed. Let us read the poem. Sometimes I think that nothing that ever comes into this house goes out. Things come in every day. Sometimes I think a very casual opening, a very personal opening. The poet does not try to universalize, does not try to generalize. Instead, he says sometimes, not at all times. I don't have the time to think of my house all the time. I think of the house only occasionally. And when I think of the house, this is what I feel. Sometimes I think. You can relate this word, the third word in the first line of the poem, with the second word in the title of the poem, reflections. Reflections means thoughts. Sometimes I think that nothing that ever comes into this house goes out. There is no doubt that the poet is writing with his tongue in his cheek. He says that everything that comes into the house remains there. And the poet amplifies on this in the lines to come, in the stanzas to come. Anything that comes into the house remains there. What a great house. I would like to invite you to compare, or more exactly contrast, the opening lines of this poem with the opening lines of another extremely famous poem in Indian poetry in English, in Indian literature in English, which is also about a house, which is also about the family house of the poet. I have in mind my grandmother's house of Kamala Das. Let me try to remember the lines. This is how the poem begins, if I'm not wrong. There is a house now far away where once I received love. What a contrast! The attitude of Kamala Das, the approach of Kamala Das is the more typical, is the more characteristic attitude, the more characteristic, more typical approach. Most poets are enveloped in nostalgia when they think of their family houses, as exemplified by Kamala Das. But here is a poet who decides to distance his family house from himself and subject it to satire. Here is a poet who is capable of observing his own family house through the lens of irony. That is the greatness of Ramanujan. Sometimes I think that nothing that ever comes into this house goes out. What a great house! The members of the family living in the house have no habit of returning anything they take into the house, anything that they borrow, anything that they bring into the house. Indeed, they are great people. Things come in every day. Things come in every day. But you must remember that this is a case of enjambment. The line does not come to an end here. It flows into the next stanza. Things come in every day to lose themselves among other things lost long ago, among other things lost long ago. The full meaning becomes clear only when we move from the opening stanza to the second stanza. Things come in every day. Okay, fine. And what happens to those things? Things come in every day to lose themselves. Among other things lost long ago. Among other things lost long ago. So the house is a place for collecting things from all around, a place where things can come in from everywhere and lose themselves. The members of the family of the house are such honest people, such good people, such ethical people that they never return what they borrow. They never return what they take into the house. The house is a center for collecting things from all over and for allowing those things to lose themselves among things lost earlier, which themselves have lost themselves among things lost even earlier. There are a couple of things which we have to notice here. The first is that it appears that the members of the family are by nature covetous. They have a sense of acquisition. They're acquisitive by nature. They're covetous by nature. They're grasping by nature. They're hoarding by nature. They're greedy by nature. They have a tendency to acquire things which belong to others and not return them, even when these are things which have to be returned. Their sense of acquisitiveness, their sense of covetousness, their tendency to hoard. That's the first thing you should notice here. The second thing is that the poet does not say that the things are arranged inside the house. It would appear that there is a complete lack of organization inside the house. The things are lost among things which are already lost, which are among things lost even before the second set of things were lost. So, what we find inside the house is confusion, chaos, clutter. I think this is the typical South Indian Brahmin or Tamil Brahmin middle class family house of the early 20th century or the first half of the 20th century, where there is nothing but confusion, chaos, disorganization, clutter, mess, and with every passing day, the mess becomes a bigger mess. because new things arrive to lose themselves among old things which are already lost among older things.